Right, good morning everyone. Thank you so much for coming on what is a horrible day. So thanks for navigating the traffic, the weather, the parking situation. Really pleased to see you all here today to really think about this important topic. I'm the Director of Executive Education, Sarah Lethbridge. I've been in business school for 13 years, and we really want to listen to our business audience, understand what you need, and then it's my role to design programmes of learning that really help your organisations to fly. So if you've got any interest in some of our open courses or our bespoke offer where we actually listen to you, design a programme specifically for you, then please do get in touch. In terms of our calendar of events, we've actually got an open evening. Cheese and wine will be provided on Monday the 8th of April. So if you did want to find out about our Executive MBA, our part-time HRM programme, or indeed our Masters of Public Leadership, then please do come and join us for that evening, running from about 5:30 to 7:30. Some of you might have come to Darryl Mann's Innovation Masterclass. Breakfast briefing, well, he's actually delivering a whole day on the topic on Monday the 29th of April, so please do get in touch if that's of interest. Our next breakfast briefing is on water scarcity, the threats and opportunities for Wales. It might be hard to believe on a day like today, but yeah, we've got some experts from our Water Research Institute who are going to be sharing information about that. We've got a couple of creative cluster events which are exciting, and then on the 10th of July, Professor Mark Barry and Transport for Wales are talking about the Metro project. So yeah, a bit more information about the open meeting. Please do join us for that one. And I'm obviously a lean specialist, not obvious to be honest, I'm a lean specialist. I am a lean specialist, and I'm interested in continuous improvement. How do we look at processes? And I've spent a lot of time teaching different organisations how to embrace a continuous improvement approach. So what I'm doing on Thursday the 18th of April is offering a day of training in lean thinking, in continuous improvement, and all proceeds go to Llamau, our charity of the year at the business school. So again, if you're interested in that and just like to spend a day with me when I hopefully have a better voice than I have at the moment, then please again do get in touch. So it's important to remember that our breakfast briefing is live streamed to how many people across the globe, I don't know at this precise moment, but you won't be featured, the back of your head to be featured. And at question and answers sessions, we're going to do the questions and answers in 2 bits today, because Peter unfortunately has to go to teach, how dare you, at 9 a.m. So there'll be a section for questions for Peter's session, and then a section for Fran after that. So please wait for the microphone so that the recording is set up. And I'm actually going to now hand over to Helen Beddoe, sorry Helen Beddoe, who's our Deputy Head of Marketing in Cardiff University, who's going to chair this event for us today. Thank you, Helen.
Good morning, everybody. Please don't let the fact I work in marketing put you off. Just to say that. I'm very, very lucky in my role here at Cardiff University to get involved in a massive spectrum of events, from all sorts of very valuable and worthy causes right the way up to very high value things. The reason I'm here today, and Sarah invited me, is because the project I'm working on at the moment is to help the actor and activist Michael Sheen and his team bring the Homeless World Cup to Wales in July this year. It's a very word, people think, what's that? Well, it's a football tournament, but we've got about 64 teams from 50 different countries coming to Cardiff and Wales in July, and all of the participants are homeless in one way or another. And I'm learning something every single day about this issue, and what I'm learning is that I'm very ignorant about lots of the issues. But I'm also very concerned, and I'm very passionate about what can I do as an individual, what can businesses do. So I was delighted to actually come here today to find out from 2 of our experts in Wales into not just what's happening there, and I think a lot of people will just see homelessness as people that you see on the streets, i.e. the rough sleepers, but it's a lot more complex than that. So Peter and Fran are going to talk to us about actually the roots into homelessness and why there are so many people in this situation in the UK today. So I'm not going to say any more than the fact that we're delighted that Cardiff University is going to be hosting the Homeless World Cup participants in July. The organising committee are very keen to have business buy-in and for everybody to come and watch these amazing people who Michael has seen firsthand transform their lives through the power of just getting together in a sport, and in this case happens to be football. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Peter Mackie, who is probably the leading academic in this area in the country. And a lot of Peter's work informs policy with government. And then I'm going to introduce Fran as our second speaker. So thank you. If we could say hello to Peter Mackie.
Brilliant. Bonadar, good morning. I've been told I have to stand somewhere near the microphone, but a few of you have actually been lectured by me. You know I don't stand still. So I'll do my best so it works for the live stream wherever the cameras are. So firstly, I think it's testament to the Cardiff community that we've got so many folk here. I think that has to be said. But it's also, I think, a reflection of how grave the problem is, and that we've actually failed to grapple with it effectively, the fact that the problem persists in the scale that it does. So what I'm going to do today is, I was kind of given free rein to talk, which is a really dangerous thing with me. But the thinking is, how can I be as useful as I can to the sector? So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of context. Yeah, if we're trying to solve a problem, if we're trying to deal with an issue, we need to know the causes and the roots of that problem. So I'm going to do a bit of that. It'll feel a little bit like Homelessness 101 lecture, which is actually where I'm heading to after this. But then just move into reflecting on a little bit about what we know is working and some of the solutions that are emerging. And some of those will feel a bit different probably to what you're imagining might be the solutions to homelessness. But I'll stop short of a lengthy lecture on what those solutions may be. For those that want that lecture, you can come for free to one of my master's classes. Fran is actually then going to go on to talk more about how we deal with the issues and some of the solutions that Llamau are pursuing. And I think it is also important just to give a context. I am the vice chair of the board at Llamau, so there's in some ways that needs to be said at the start. If I'm overemphasising how great Llamau is, there is a vested interest there. But you can't overemphasise how great Llamau is. So, understanding homelessness in our city. First point, if we're looking to address a problem, we need to set out our goal. Yeah? And our goal, and this is now kind of a widely accepted goal, and actually it's used in the occasional meeting by Welsh Government. It's not written down in government policy, but it's moving towards being an accepted goal for the sector, and that is that homelessness should be rare, brief and non-recurrent. Yeah? Rare. We should stop it happening as best we can. It will happen to some, and if it happens, make sure it's as short and as untraumatic as possible. And then if somebody does become homeless and we solve that challenge, they don't come back into homelessness. Yeah? Non-recurrent. That's our goal, and that's how we should be measuring success. And I'll reflect a little bit about at different times in the presentation about whether we're getting there. So as I said, two or three things I'll do. One is just talk about the trends, the scale of the problem, in 2 slides only. I'll spend most of the time on pathways or causes of homelessness, and then a little bit about what works and what helps us achieve our end goal. So this is Cardiff. This is the number of households to which Cardiff Council has owed a duty to house. Yeah. It sits within our legislative framework. But this is the trend from around 2009 through to 2018. And if I put the trend line in, it's pretty much horizontal. Yeah. All I really want to say about that is we've not made massive progress in the sheer scale. The caveat is that actually if you looked at the number of people who become homeless because of things like welfare reform post-2010, the number of people actually goes up, yeah, across the UK. So in some ways Cardiff has done well to stay flatline. But it's essentially what we call in social sciences a wicked problem. Yeah, we've been struggling to address it. And to echo that first slide was about the general homeless population. That includes families, people at, perhaps at risk of losing a private rented flat. This line represents our rough sleepers count. Basically, one night a year we go out and we count the number of rough sleepers. A good colleague in this room has referred to this as being as useful as a weather forecast as it is a representation of homelessness numbers. But it's all we've got to go on. We're working on this system. We are going to develop a world-leading system, I hope, that will give us better numbers. But again, the point I want to make is it's a problem we've not addressed. If anything, that line is going up. And I think the reason you're here is probably because it's visibly going up to most of you. Okay, so pathways into homelessness. 4 points I'll talk about. Poverty, the housing system, housing market, institutional failure, and this idea of relations and experiences. And these issues come from a whole load of systems mapping that we've done. Business students and business scholars will understand that. Systems mapping that tell us these are the points at which people are, routes at which people are coming to homelessness. So, hands up if you've heard this phrase. This is from a Guardian article. You're 2 pay packets or paychecks away from the street. Hands up if you've heard that. Aha. Hands up if you agree with it. Hands up, come on, don't be shy. I told you it's Geography 101. Okay, some agreement, some not. I've used this line in previous presentations. I've used this line because it was the mantra of the sector, to get people to understand that homelessness isn't just about rough sleeping, about complex needs. But actually, we've had research fairly recently that disproves that. Yeah. We're not all 2 paychecks away, and a number of reasons for that. But the underlying one is poverty. Poverty is statistically proven to be the underlying cause, or the major underlying cause of homelessness. Yeah, it precedes homelessness, particularly poverty in childhood. If we address poverty in childhood, we'll see those numbers come flying down. Yeah, that's one of our root causes. It's a problem though, because if we're in the homelessness sector or in business, and you say that's a cause, that's not as easy to fix as putting up some sort of a soup kitchen or whatever you might see as your solution. That's a major problem to address. But we have to recognise it. That's the challenge we've got to address. Interestingly, that same research by good colleague Suzanne Fitzpatrick up in Heriot-Watt tells us that social networks act as a buffer. Yeah? Those relations and networks act as a buffer to the impacts of poverty. Yeah? Again, it can tell us lessons about how we intervene, and Fran will talk about that, the importance of building those networks back up where they've been disrupted. Housing failure. So around 1 in 5 homeless households that come into Cardiff and are housed through the homelessness system become homeless because of loss of private rented accommodation. If I showed you these figures for London or England, those figures are up much, much higher into the 60 odd percent. Yeah? But it's still a major cause of homelessness here. We have one of the most precarious private rented sectors in the world. I do a lot of stuff in the global south, and when I talk about how precarious our rights are in the rental sector, they laugh. Yeah, we have a really precarious private rental sector. So it's very easy to evict somebody. We have very, very little grounds required to evict somebody. That's one of our major challenges. But also affordability, and I'll pick up one slide that just illustrates this for Cardiff. This is basically the percent of the housing market that single people can access if you're under the age of 35 in Cardiff. It's 6% when you're on benefits. It's supposed to be. Benefits are supposed to, local housing allowance is supposed to enable you to access 30% of the market, the lowest 30% of the market. In Cardiff, because UK government has decided that we shouldn't uplift the local housing allowance, the benefits, we can only access 6% of the market. It takes away your solutions if somebody is homeless, and it is a cause of homelessness. That's something we need to fix, but it's not an easy one because the powers are retained in Westminster. Institutional failure. This is one that absolutely infuriates me. Yeah, and you can put that on the record. Institutional failure. Leaving prison. For 14% of people that we house in Cardiff through the homelessness system, the cause is leaving prison. That's nonsense. It's a captive audience. And I choose those words quite deliberately. Yeah, you can't be surprised. Yeah, And yet we're allowing that to be a major cause of homelessness. It's something we've got to fix, address. More recently and worryingly, there's also been, in the recent rough sleeper count, we interviewed rough sleepers, and we were told that actually for a high proportion, leaving hospital, discharge from hospital into homelessness was a common cause. These are things that we can easily fix. And relations and experiences. So that idea that actually it's a relationship breakdown with parents, relatives, friends as a common cause for nearly a quarter of households. And that's high. In Wales, it's high relative to the rest of the UK. Again, it's something we can fix. And again, Fran will talk about it, and I'll mention it in a moment. This slide is about just illustrating a little bit about the complexity of the pathways. I know that the quality, sorry, you won't be able to see it. I'm going to talk through it. It's more the visualisation. If you want to see it, you can read Mackie 2014, Nations Apart. It was a study I did for Crisis where we spoke with 500 single homeless people across the UK. And it just gives you a whole load of these stories. I'll just run through a little bit of you. So this is a guy living with the father. Father's an alcoholic. Father sells the home, the young person leaves, breaks into a hostel and is arrested. Ends up in youth offending institution. The probation service then finds them temporary accommodation, so they're in a hostel. Get evicted from the hostel for alcohol problems. From the hostel, has a period in and out of prison and sleeping rough, meets a girlfriend, has a child, goes into the private rented sector. That relationship breaks down into a tent in the garden, assaults someone, gets a prison sentence, into prison, comes out of prison through contact with sister, relations, has a period of quite settled stay with his sister. That relationship breaks down due to the alcohol issues, ends up sleeping rough, gets found sleeping rough, goes into a hostel, and things aren't looking much brighter at the end of that. That's not an uncommon pathway or a story. It's a particular story. It's about a person with quite complex needs, but not the most complex. But look at all these points in time at which we could have done something, the state could have done something, or as a community we could have done something. Yeah? That's how complex it is. And actually what we found in that study is normally people will have been homeless 3 times before they even ask us for help. Yeah? Right. So, what works? What works to help us achieve that end goal? If you remember, in fact, let's test. What did I say our end goal was? Homeless should be rare, brief. Okay, so you're going to go away, that's in your head. That's what we should be aiming to achieve. Gold star at the front. Right, okay, rare, brief and non-recurrent. I'm going to come to the brief and non-recurrent bit first, because I'm most excited by some of the stuff that we might be doing around the rare bit. So brief and non-recurrent. Actually, Wales is leading the way. Globally, Wales is leading the way. We brought in the Housing Wales Act 2014, implemented, commenced in 2015, that basically says, if you are at risk of homelessness, or you're homeless, in Wales, we have a duty, councils have a duty to take reasonable steps to help you secure accommodation, or to help you keep accommodation if you're at risk of losing it. For everybody, irrespective of whether you're a family, single, complex needs. Yeah? There aren't many places that have such a duty. Yeah, and it's worked quite well. Yeah, we see our prevention rates, we're able to prevent homelessness in about 60% of cases. But it's still at point of crisis. We're coming in, I'm about to lose my flat. In about 60% of cases we're successful. We're less successful when people are already homeless at finding an alternative. That's working for most people. However, and there's a caveat, and this is where that increasing trend of rough sleeping is visible in the streets, even if we're dubious about the statistics. There are groups, for instance, rough sleepers with complex needs, where that duty isn't being particularly effective. That duty is not being particularly effective because the sorts of things we're doing aren't as well resourced and as intensive as they need to be with that group. And we are still in our solutions under that duty, finding people temporary accommodation, waiting for them to be then ready to move on to settled accommodation. This kind of being ready for independent living. And we know from the international evidence, and it is the bit of practice, the intervention, that is best evidenced globally. Yeah, I can't tell you how many random control trials on it. Yeah, we don't have that for pretty much any other intervention. But housing first. which says if you are homeless and you can have the most complex of mental health, substance misuse needs, etc., we find you, we will give you settled accommodation from day one. Yeah? Housing first. And then the support wraps around, and it's choice-based. And if things fail, because things will go wrong, don't worry, there's accommodation. It's there, it's permanent, it's settled, we'll find somewhere else. It's successful in about 80% of cases, with the most complex of households. And that's something that Welsh Government is piloting. Yeah, it's funded a number of pilots, but it's something that we can embrace more. And it needs support. It needs support of landlords and others to say, yes, we'll make properties available for this group. Yeah. And business sector could play a big role in driving housing first in Wales, I think. Right, coming back to that first one, and this is where we're spending quite a lot of time on this bit. We need to spend more time and more funding on making homelessness rare. And two things that I'll pick up on is institutions and that idea of relations and families. So, this is the project that excites me the most at the moment, and Fran will come on to talk about it in a minute. But it's the Geelong project from Australia. And it basically says we're going to go into schools very early on, and we're going to identify those young people at risk of homelessness. And it works on the basis of we do a survey of all school students, and in the survey we identify risks of homelessness. About 4% of young people are identified as being at risk, and that leads to a tiered set of interventions, from a really intensive case management to the second tier is family mediation. We mediate with the family. We look at the challenges. Why is it that you, in your survey, said you spent 2 nights last week sleeping on a friend's sofa? Yeah? And we look to intervene and mediate. Now, here's the point. And when you think about it, it's common sense. But in those surveys, when you say, actually, we're going to go in and we're going to do a survey and we're going to find out young people at risk of homelessness, guess what schools say? Guess what the homelessness sector normally says in reply? Can anyone have a guess? We're going to go in, we're going to bring in a survey, and we're going to identify the young people at risk in your school. I've never stepped foot in your school before, but I'm going to be the expert to come and tell you who's at risk. What's the reply from teachers and others? Yeah, we know the problem, kids. Yeah, they never come to school. They're doing really badly in class. They're affecting my percentages and performance. We know them. My wife's a deputy head. I know this story. Right. So that's the story. It comes back, and I believe that too. Yeah, I assumed that too. And what they found here is actually you miss about 60% of the young people. And here's the common sense bit, because school is the safe place. School is the place I feel most secure. Yeah, it's common sense, isn't it? But you all knew the reply that we'd be getting. And so what Geelong does is it goes in, it does this survey, it identifies those young people, and it brings in the interventions. And it's a collaboration in the community. It's based on this collaboration. And what they found is that it led to a 40%. This is the homelessness presentations of young people. That's Geelong being brought in. And that's the reduction then in the number of young people that are presenting later on. 40% reduction. I don't know if we'll achieve that in Wales. Maybe things are different. Maybe we've got a more understanding, caring context in schools. But it's worth a shot, isn't it? That's upstream. That's one project, one example that happens to have come from international learning that we've been involved in with colleagues across the globe. There's so much more out there. And we can innovate. Yeah, that's how we came up with the Housing Wales Act. We innovated. As a sector, they gave us the principles, we turned it into a law. So we need to head in this direction. That's the sort of thing that I think we can be investing in and pushing for. So 2 takeaway messages, and then we've got time for questions, is, look, in terms of the system, the legislation we've got is working quite well. But there's a group that we're not doing particularly well with. That's the complex needs, the rough sleepers that you see on the streets. We have Housing First that we know works with that group. Let's pursue it. Let's not pursue hostels and other things. Let's pursue this model. At least get it as our mainstream, our de facto response. And here's the interesting thing. Internationally, often what you find is that's where the attention focuses. Let's end rough sleeping. Let's end rough sleeping. You'll spend your life ending rough sleeping until you stop the flow of people coming to the streets. And sorry to talk about flows and numbers, I was on the car here on the way crying, thinking about actually the people in this. I remember some of the impact events and the stories we get. I am very aware these are people at the centre of these stories, and as an academic we end up in numbers. But if we don't address that flow of people into homelessness, we'll always be looking to invest in housing first. Let's do some of this. And it's not either or, and it's often presented as either or, and you have organisations that advocate one or the other, and they fight against each other for funding and support. It's both, and we can do both. So that's my takeaway messages. And the last one is, before I say thank you, the last one is you guys have got a really, hands up who's from business. Hands up who's from business. I've been talking as if you're all from business. Some of you are local authorities and others. Actually, business plays a much bigger role in places like the States and Canada, partly because they have no welfare system in the States. But there's a real opportunity. And one of the things I have learned from the States is how businesses come together around an issue. And I've seen them do it around youth homelessness, where any kind of rivalries get put aside. You get Virgin sat alongside their equivalent of B&Q around a table going, yeah, we'll back it collaboratively. And that's one thing I think we do well in Wales. We do collaborate, we do stuff together. And there's an opportunity to do that. And they're the two areas that maybe we might want to think about prioritising. So thank you. Diolch yn fawr. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
I told you he was good. Now, we have literally just over 5 minutes for any questions. We do have some microphones, so the lady at the back shot her hand up straight away, so we'll start with you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Nazia. I work for an organisation called Taipao. The project that I work on is about the private rented sector, and I just nodding my head furiously at the Housing First model. I think it's really important, and looking forward to Wales implementing that. For it to work, we need to engage private sector landlords. We need to persuade private sector landlords to let out their properties to people with very complex needs. How do you suggest we do that?
Oh, good question. You're right, we need landlord engagement. And not just for Housing First, but it's our main response within the Housing Wales Act. We rely on landlords. How do we do it? Local authorities are already doing it. Cardiff's already doing it. Valley's authorities are already doing it. And there's a suite of things. So some of them are financial. That just said, look, we'll cover the rent in advance, we'll cover the deposit, we'll cover any damage that happens, etc., etc. There's the financial. But we've just been doing a kind of an update review on the implementation of that legislation, and actually what we're finding out is the hand-holding that's going on for folk going into that housing is proving as crucial as the financial support. So the commitment says, look, there'll be a support worker here, because we're not expecting you as a private landlord to be a trained social worker. Yeah, we'll bring those expertise and we'll promise that they'll be there when they're needed, not in a month's time waiting list or 6 weeks or whatever. But the message that is emerging from local authorities is, wouldn't it be nice if there was a resource for landlords to be able to tap into, and I don't mean a financial one, that says, actually, when I need support as a landlord in helping to manage some of potential behaviours or whatever, that I can access that. But it's the support and then some financial investment.
Bore da. I'm Sharon Basham-Pike. I'm a local business owner. I want to follow up on your question, your point that you made, which you set us up very nicely to ask the question, which is, it was disproved that we're no longer 2 pay packets away from homelessness. So what is the current statistic, and can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, I know, it was a nice trick question. So essentially before we were arguing 2 paychecks was a mantra in order for us to start thinking that we're all vulnerable to homelessness. And basically what this study did is it took, and I mean thousands of households of data, existing household survey data, where there are questions around homelessness. And it looked back, and it basically says, look, there are a whole load of us will never become homeless. Yeah, because we're financially better off, or we've got these really wonderful support networks. And it just said, look, poverty And it's not a case of 3 paychecks, 5 paychecks, or the lowest decile of households, etc. It's just poverty when you look at income relative to those outcomes around housing homelessness. It's an indicator, a driver of it. It's as simple as that.
Okay, I've got this lady.
Jenny Rathbone, Assembly Member, Cardiff Central. Criminal justice isn't devolved as a responsibility, so how do we get the prison service to do what they say they're going to do, and they have often said they're going to do, which is to work with us and actually do completely normal things like tell us when somebody is going to be released from prison. It's extraordinary. We're still having these same conversations 20 years on.
I know. And you're not a plant. I didn't plant that question. That it's spot on. Now I'll tell you an interesting story and then move to the solutions. The interesting story is we learned from the implementation in Wales that a lot of these services weren't referring in to our wonderful duty. Councils had to help. If you just refer in early enough, we'll intervene before people lose their houses, because we're more successful then, 60% versus 40%. So we told England that when they were copying our law. And England, in their wisdom, said, OK, well, we'll have a duty to refer. And there is a duty on prisons in England to refer into the local authorities if somebody's at risk of homelessness. There's a duty on healthcare to do the same. There's a duty on DWP to do the same. And in this current uptake, this current set of interviews we've been doing with the sector, here's what's interesting, is prisons are phoning up Welsh local authorities saying, we've got a duty to refer to you, but we don't seem to have anything about how we refer into Welsh authorities. And DWP are doing the same. We've got a duty to refer, and they're phoning up councils and saying, we don't quite have the systems or the protocols for your authority for some reason. That's because we don't have a duty to refer. But all of a sudden this new law in England is having a positive impact in Wales because we're identifying people. And actually our reply to the prisons is, yes, we've had a protocol and a pathway in place ever since 2015 and before that you should have been implementing that's actually equivalent to that duty. So one thing is, a duty to refer seems to be having a positive impact in the English case. Maybe that's something we want in Wales, because then those publicly funded authorities have a duty to identify and send people in, rather than what we have at the moment, which is a kind of a weaker protocol in Wales. Beyond that, I don't quite know the solution. There's some interesting work on healthcare in the Canadian context, where they've got discharge into homelessness down to 0. And often it's just about somebody within that health service taking this as their priority. Pooled funding is sometimes used as a mechanism to make these things happen. But I do like the law as a starting point. I'm getting sly eyes from government. Right. We've got enough. We've got 700 bits of legislation to get through for Brexit. I can probably take one more, and then otherwise the class is going to run away.
This lady had her hand up for a long time.
I'm Beth Evans. I'm a social housing finance lawyer from Clark Wilmot. I was interested in what you're saying about the Geelong project. What form does the survey take, and how do you ensure that you're getting accurate answers? Okay,
good one. It's a complex survey, and it's not without its imperfections. Absolutely not. I've gone through the survey in some detail, and there's some questions that we won't use. They're very Australian. The Americans have adapted it, and they've made it very American, and we would adapt it. But the important point is some of those questions are validated scientifically, so we know they work and they predict what we think they predict around mental health, around homelessness, etc. They're self-completed, but there is always the research challenge of actually are people reporting accurately. But what's important to recognise is it's not just a survey and that's it, and then that puts you in a service. It's a survey that's a starting point for a conversation. It's a human service. So the survey identifies folk potentially at risk, and there's a huge scale at which you can fall. And then it's conversations between whoever it is that's identified as welfare support within the school, and that takes many forms, and then the service, the support provider that's coming in. And it's this collaboration, this conversation. And actually, for the largest proportion of young people at risk, what it ends up being is something just called monitoring. And that's just on a weekly basis. How are you doing? Everything all right? Anything you want to talk about? Being there, a friendly face. And then for others it's more intense and it's mediation, etc. But it's the fact that it's not just the survey that gives you some reassurance. Yeah.
What age do they complete the survey?
All the way through secondary school. It's
Secondary
repeated
school.
annually, all the way through secondary school. Good.
I think
Yeah.
we have to release you now to go.
Get them down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Fran, I'm going. I'm absolutely delighted. I've heard a lot about this already. Frances Beecher has been the Chief Executive of Llamau, the youth homelessness charity since 2001, I believe. 2001. Everything I've heard about this lady has been inspirational and positive. Okay, I'm not going to big you up anymore, but I'm sure we're going to learn even more than we just heard from Pete. So I'm not going to talk any further. Fran, would you like to thank you?
How do you follow that? Cheers, Pete. That's pretty amazing. And you can see why he is our vice chair. First thing I'm going to try and do is see, whoo, that worked. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today. And the reason I'm really thrilled to be here is to know how many people are actually really interested in the issue and really want to focus on what can they do to help, and that's absolutely amazing. So I'll tell you a little bit about Llamau. We are Wales's leading homeless charity for young people and women. We're a values-led organisation, and we put the people who use our services first and at the heart of everything we do. And you heard Pete talk very much around prevention, rather than trying to address a problem once it's happened. And that's very much about the organisation. Because for many years, Llamau has worked very hard on early intervention and prevention for those most at risk. And Pete talked a lot about research. We are the European leading youth organisation that prevents young people going into homelessness and ending up on the streets. And we are very proud of that. But people do become homeless. So we work to have what we call a place to call home. This is absolutely vital when you are working with, especially with young people and women. Llamau does not run hostels. Llamau does not run institutions. We work with people in home environments, and that has been proven time and time again to be the most effective way. I won't go through too much, but we have gender-specific support services. And again, right from the start, Llamau invests in getting people back into education and training. 80% of the young people we work with have disengaged from school around the ages of 12 to 13. They may turn up because it's the one consistent place they feel safe, but they ain't going to lessons and they ain't going to classes. So when you are trying then to engage people back into mainstream education or get them back into schools, they haven't got the skills. So they revert back to exactly what you and I would do, which is either play the class clown or the one, don't take me on because you're going to regret it. So we work with young people in our own Learning for Life, which can give accreditation up to A-level GCSE. And we also have our Summit Line programme, which I'll talk a little bit about, which gives young people work, training, mentoring, and then 6 months paid work experience. And around 68% of those young people remain in those jobs. As I said, the most important thing, if you've experienced homelessness, is to have a feeling of home, a feeling of security and safety. What is the thing you look forward to the most when you've had the roughest day, when your colleagues have driven you mad, when people have brought you close to tears, when you don't know what to do and where do you go? Where do you want to go? What do you do when you haven't got somewhere to go? So we ensure that we give people a sense of home in the environments that they are in. It is their own home. It is their own front door. It gives a sense of belonging, a sense of security, a sense of safety. And that's the bedrock of delivering high quality services. And it's something I do not understand why people who have homes think that there is any other environment to deliver support from. Because once people feel safe, once their emotional health is improving, we can help them get the essential skills they need in life, leading naturally on to engagement with employment, training and independence. Llamau's entire purpose is to enable people to fulfil their potential and to move forward. And we work to empower young people and women to thrive and to live positive and fulfilling lives. And guess what? Unsurprisingly, they do. Pete talked about the issues facing people that we work with, people who are more vulnerable to becoming homeless. And as Pete said, poverty is the most. This old thing of the mantra, as Pete talked about, the 2 paychecks away. It's not, if you have social networks around you, you know, the vast majority of us, no matter what happens, even today, I can go up to Merthyr to my mum and dad. And they'll go, oh God. But I know they'll be there. If you haven't got that safety net, and the one thing that I always talk about is 68% of homeless young people, if they run away, are never reported missing. Not by the corporate parents, not by the person they're living with. Can you imagine what that does to your own mental well-being, your own sense of worth? If you don't turn up, nobody even thinks it important enough to report you as a person that might be at risk. Imagine now if I kidnapped this half of the room. When you don't turn up, how soon will someone be ringing, texting? And I think that is something that I'd really like everyone to take home, is that our own feeling of self-worth, our own feeling of security is really built up in our relationships and what others feel about us. Isolation doesn't mean isolation just being on your own. It often means building a hole within yourself, that you have no sense of self-worth. Because if nobody else really cares about you, why should you care about yourself? And I think that is really, really important. And one stat that is bandied about and is true is the average life expectancy of someone who is homeless is 47. So come on, hands up, who's willing to admit to be approaching or just over 47? We're gone, guys. We're dead. And we're dead because we do not have the services and the quality of life and the security. We are ill long before our time, and that is something I think we should all remember. So, with over 30 years of working to support homeless and care experienced young people, Llamau have learnt along the way that the best outcomes come when we provide holistic services that incorporate emotional and psychological needs of the people we support. When we work hand in hand with others, and when our colleagues have the highest quality and training. And over the last 2 years, we have worked really hard with experts by experience, the people we're privileged to work alongside, and clinical psychologists to develop a psychologically informed PI2 approach to working in this field. And this is our PI2 model, which is in line with current neuropsychological research findings and models of best practice trauma care. And we have found this model emphasises the importance of the different types of support that are needed at different stages. And you remember I talked earlier about safety, feeling calm. You can't deliver support, you can't engage with someone when their brain is in what I call hyperarousal. So just to give you an example, can you imagine, most of you might, a lot of you are drivers, okay? You have a shunt, you're on the fast lane of the M4. All right, somebody goes into the back of you. You can't get your car back. You know how frightened you're feeling. You know how panic-driven you're feeling. You know that the only thing, I'm going to add something, your kids are in the back. Let's make it really bad. So your kids are in the back. All you were thinking is, how the hell am I going to get to safety? Somebody pops round to the side of you and goes, can you talk to me? Would you like to work with me? What are you going to say? I know what I'd say. That is the mindset of someone who has experienced trauma, someone who's experienced abuse. That is the mindset when you are literally living on survival skills. You are not in any place or shape to understand or accept what is going on. And that's why we start with security, why we start with support. And once we have got that, then we can start working and moving people with their support forward. Our support helps counteract disadvantages. Multiple and complex needs require equally comprehensive and multi-layered support interventions. If ending homelessness was as easy as giving someone a roof over their head, we would have done it by now. I know Cardiff have enough accommodation to house every single person out on that street. And in what is that local authority, any local authority, expected to do? But what they've done is they've now invested very heavily in specialist outreach teams which start to connect people. Because the other thing that really infuriates me is human beings, we all have connections. People are what makes things happen. People are what makes businesses work. Businesses don't make businesses work. It's the people who are invested in it, the people who believe in it, the people who give their all to it, the people who are proud to be there. So why do we then try and process other human beings? It makes no sense, and it's certainly not what we do in Llamau. So this leads me on to business and charity partnerships. Why are organisations like Llamau so keen to enter into partnerships? How do these worlds join together? And what can all parties gain from it? And looking at it, for a business point of view, there's huge talk about brand reputation, staff morale, enhancing employee. You get greater credibility because you're working on something that is a social responsibility. And those are all very, very true. But I think one of the biggest benefits for business is not just all that. It's about you being able to connect to others who then can become part of your world. Because all of this, and this is if you read it, this is what they'll tell you, and I'm not saying it's not true. But we have worked with Cardiff University, with different schools, and because of our joint partnerships with them, the world of business has opened up for the people we are working with. And they no longer see people who have been homeless as other. They see them as exactly the same as you and I. And that, for me, we can talk all about this, but that, for me, is what really matters. Because we are, as a human race, great at othering. And then we're in a really scary time at the moment. We are othering till the cows come home. You know, if we can find, and why do we do it? It's important to understand, and I told you about the psychological environment. We do it to make ourselves feel safe and secure. It's a natural human trait. We're not evil or bad because we're doing it. We don't have a lot of self-awareness, that's another story, but again, but we do it because if it happens to others, if it's not me, if it's them, then I'm safe I'm secure, and possibly my family are safe and secure. And once we start breaking down those barriers, once we start breaking into different worlds, and this is something Llamau has always done, the charity sector can be very guilty of staying in its little silos. Oh, protect us. Or give us money, you can trust us. You know, we have to prove things just as much as everybody else, but we need to be connected to the wider community. And that's why I think partnerships are so important, and that's what we get from our partnerships. The other thing that we get from a lot of our partnerships, and don't get me wrong, we are very grateful for fundraising. We desperately need fundraising. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But businesses are very often, as I say, your strategies, your business strategies means you have to work out the challenges ahead, and you've got to know what's coming ahead. So do we. You are very good at when something is really difficult of getting into a room, locking that door until you've got a solution to that problem, you're not leaving that room. We need that too. And sometimes thinking about innovative ways, different ways to tackle issues is something that business and business brains can certainly give us. As well as you often have extremely highly experienced staff with specialist skills and a major pool of willing volunteers to come and work with us. And no, I don't mean just painting a room. I mean giving your brain power, your skills, your experience. People who, you know, we've all been mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. We all understand human relationships. So, the stark reality is that the rise in homelessness is a direct result of austerity measures and the welfare reform agenda. It's as simple as that. Charities and the third sector were warning UK government 10 years ago what was going to happen. And again, they don't listen to us. They do listen to businesses. We missed the trick. We should have been talking to business a long time ago rather than just trying to talk directly to government, because your voices have greater credibility than ours. It's a stark fact. It's true. So as a result of that, this safety net, society's safety nets have been cut wide open and people are falling through at an alarming rate. As I said, homeless people are no different to you and I, but people do listen to businesses. So, as I said, your support to fundraise is invaluable, hand on heart. Thanks to austerity, we're in a position of having to supplement our service delivery. And that's because many of our grants, many of our funding, many of our contracts are sliced to high heaven. Why? Because funding's been sliced to high heaven. It's no different. Somehow charities are expected to apologise for the fact that we need money to deliver services. I make no apologies. Because what I do know is when we work with people, 96% move on. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years after homelessness, they're no longer homeless. As Pete talked, it is rare, it is brief, and it is non-recurrent. So your support would be absolutely invaluable in fundraising. But as Pete said, one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about today is getting businesses behind the prevention agenda. Failing to prevent homelessness is not just hugely costly and ineffective, but it's hugely damaging and destructive for the individual. When we work with even young people, they have been so damaged by what has been done to them, by how many times they've been let down, by the fact that people say, we're going to do this and don't do that, by the abuse and trauma that they've experienced, that they no longer trust. We know when someone comes into our organisation, that first 2 months is going to be hell, because they're going to do absolutely absolutely everything in their power to prove that we will let them down. And it's that self-fulfilling mindset. You're going to let me down, so I'm damn well sure you'll do it on my terms. The longer someone is homeless, it's common sense. The longer they are outside society, the harder it is to think that there's a place for you. We talk about othering. We all other. So do homeless people. They don't care. It's not important. I'm not for them. They don't give a toss. One of the biggest impacts on some of our young people at our impact events is looking at people in the community, looking at people in businesses who are interested in them. We do a silly appeal. It's not silly, but it sounds kind of silly at Easter, for Easter eggs. We ask everyone so that every single child in our refuges, every single young person has an Easter egg. Why? The reason we do it is, one, it's what we all do, but knowing and seeing that people have bothered to go and get their own child Easter eggs and bought another 2, or a company has got together and bought a batch in for them, means somebody cares, not because they have to, but because they want to. There is nothing more important than that. The kindness of strangers, the kindness of some other human being, can make the biggest impression. And that happens at Christmas. And it really does make a huge impression. So if you can help us get behind the preventative agenda, because we as an organisation have always worked on preventive services, and we need to see a shift to much earlier intervention to prevent homelessness. There are 3 types of prevention, and I'm just going to talk about primary at the moment. Now, primary prevention comes from health, okay? So it's a structural-led initiative. So basically, primary prevention includes the immunisation, all the vaccinations. We vaccinate everybody. That's primary prevention. Or the anti-smoking campaign. Everybody shouldn't be smoking. In homelessness, what it means is that we identify those most at risk of homelessness and we build protective factors around. So we then target those who are most at risk of homelessness. It's better than cure, because homelessness, as we all know, ruins people's lives, cuts their life expectancy in half, and it's also very, very expensive for society at large. So it's only sensible then that resources are made available to help those people who are, for one reason or another, more at risk. And this brings me to Upstream Cymru, which is what Pete was talking about. We have been developing a partnership with Cardiff University for a project that, as Pete said, has already been highly successful in Australia and Canada. And we're aiming to set up the Welsh version, Right for Wales. It'll be the first of its kind in Europe. And the project, as Pete said, will involve identifying young people in secondary schools who are at risk of becoming homelessness. The reason we are wanting to do that is there are many people who do not recognise what the cusp of homelessness is, what the edge of homelessness is. And as Pete said, that can be a young person who relationships are breaking down at home and mum says, oh, for God's sake, go and live with your nan. So he goes and lives with his nan for a fortnight, comes back. It's starting, the fragments are starting. Mum wants to cope. Nobody wants to throw, but, let's be honest, this is going to come as a huge shock to you. I was a very difficult teenager. But I'm very good now. Not. Then live with system. What happens in homelessness is it's what we call a downward spiral. Because then you go and live with a friend's mum and stay on the sofa or in his bedroom, and then that breaks down. So it's a friend of a friend, and then a friend of a friend of a friend. And sadly, in our society, there are many people who prey on vulnerable young people. And they use other vulnerable young people to entice other vulnerable young people. And there are many, many young people currently. We worked last year with over 9,000 people in Wales. There are many people who are paying heavy prices for just having a roof over their head. So Geelong in Australia is now Upstream Cymru in Wales. We know that around 7,000 young people ask for help with homelessness. The number's a bit bigger than that. So we have talked to 4 secondary schools that are willing to work with us, and we've picked secondary schools right the way across Wales. We've got the support and we've had the discussion with the head teachers, how we're going to do this. And then we're going to assess the impact and how it works. And then we will be pushing for a Wales-wide approach. To get this up and running, it's going to cost £250,000. Very small price of something that could actually reduce homelessness in young, by 40%. A very small price. 40% is what we're aiming for, and that's what we're going to do. Sorry, I talk for Wales, I'm running out of time. So, the other thing business can do is please get behind the End Youth Homeless Cymru. Llamau is the founding organisation. We are working to ensure that we change cultural and systemic systems in Wales. We're piloting and rolling out primary preventative programmes, and we're developing psychologically informed environments for young people. We would love you to be part of it. It is about business, it is about community, it is about the individuals. It's about a Wales-wide movement. And finally, charities are fundamentally driven by their values. Everything they do must be in pursuit of their charitable purposes. Llamau means steps of progression. Our support breaks interventions into achievable steps. Our approach works and has been academically proven to work. We want to carry the journey of continuous improvement forward, working with businesses and universities and individuals. That's all we want to do. But with you, we've got the opportunity to take the work we do forward, to do it even better. And young people and women deserve the opportunity to achieve their true potential. And that is everything Llamau is set up to do. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to say it again, wow. I hope you feel a little bit more informed. I know I certainly do. Fran, you can take a breath, have some water. I'm going to offer the opportunity to those that had their hands up before to ask Peter a question, whether they still want to ask a question. If not, we'll open the floor up to Fran. 5 minutes. Oh, my word, talk for Wales. Anybody got any questions? Yes, the young lady over here. So just wait for the microphone and then we'll all groups.
Hiya, my name's Beth from SSE. You spoke about this other mindset that we are in. How can we as a business stop that mindset in our company to try and help and ultimately make a real difference?
Come talk to us. Let us come and talk to you. Come to some of our impact events. Come and talk to organisations who are working in the field. The best thing anyone can ever do is talk to someone who's got that experience, because then it starts you to understand actually it isn't an other. It could be a friend, it could be a mother, a father who's having problems. So, my biggest advice is connect, and that's why it's so important and wanted so much to be here today. The more we connect together, the more we can break down those barriers. So please, I don't care if it's a company of 2, a business of 3. The reality is that every single individual we touch who understands more about the issue and understands just how it can happen to a lot of people, then the more we break down those barriers. So come talk to me after, I can talk. I won't talk as long, I promise.
Hi, it's just to follow on from that really. It's Kath Roberts from Evershed, Sutherland. Hiya. And just to reiterate that point, I think as far as engagement with business is concerned, we as a business have learned such a lot from our work with Llamau, and I think it's opening that window into what is going on out there and just trying to dampen down that othering that you mentioned. But I think it's such a two-way street. Yes, it's an opportunity as a business for us to give something back, and that is about skills as well as fundraising. But I would say for the people in our business, they have learned so much, and I think have been just educated really through the engagement with you and the team. So it's just to follow on that point, it's massively worth it. And thank you for everything you've done for us. Yeah.
I've got a question. How can businesses help in other practical ways? Are there any, I'm probably veering more towards the training and skills side of it.
Hugely. I mean, a lot of our partnerships with different businesses, whether you've got specialist staff, so HR, media, marketing, you know, we are always very, very interested in that. But equally coming in and talking to our young people, we have organisations that come in and work in our Learning for Life to talk about the skills that they need, to enthuse young people to say that's what they're doing. The other thing as well, like, you know, just to push our Summit Line programme, we're working with businesses right the way across Wales, so that young people can get work experience, training, mentoring, and as Pete said, we put the support around that. So we ensure, exactly as we do in the private rented sector, that we provide the support. But then they get a 6-month paid work experience. We do the pay-in, you don't do the pay-in. But the only, you know, is that there is a real possibility of keeping that job open. So there's lots and lots of different ways we can learn from businesses as well. Coming to talk to our staff team. And as I say, you know, when I say it isn't just about painting rooms as well, if people want to get their hands wet or dirty, we have lots of gardens, we have, you know, joining in some of our events and activities as well. I don't know, Jenna, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think I just add that actually, I just add that obviously I'm a fundraiser, so the biggest thing actually between kind of, I suppose, solving homelessness and not solving it is that actually it does need funding. You know, Upstream Cymru at £250,000 a year to get up and running. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but actually for a charity to raise that and get it up and running is a huge feat to undertake as well. So it's kind of a combination of that money plus the skills of the business sector, I'd say. Yeah.
We've got one last question.
Hi, thank you for your very engaging, passionate discussion around the work that you're doing. I'm Lisa Davis, I'm from the Office for National Statistics. Obviously with our field, you know, the data and the evidence talks, and the work that you're doing with Upstream Cymru with Cardiff University, how much of that is evidence and data driven, and do you have the necessary skills to make the numbers talk? Because we're talking about £250,000 pounds. If we can demonstrate the value and the quick wins through analytical data evidence, then that should help bring on more support.
Well, one, we work very closely with ONS, and we have done a massive data dive with you, which really was phenomenal. And it enabled us to identify certain groups that we needed to work in a slightly different way. But yes, the figures and the research are there abroad. What we are able to show is that the savings that we could make if this model is successful. The reason we don't want to do it Wales-wide immediately is the reality is we know we'll have to tweak it to make it Welsh, you know, and put it in the context, because in some of the different countries, for example, there isn't priority need, or there isn't any duty on local authorities or whichever they call them to actually prioritise young people. But if that's an offer, let's get you into the partnership. It was an offer, wasn't it? Yeah. Brilliant.
That's a brilliant way of rounding up, and I'm going to finish by quoting the great Michael Sheen. Sorry to bring it back to my point about the Homeless World Cup coming to Cardiff in July. Okay, shameless plug over. Michael's rationale for bringing this event to Wales and to Cardiff was to show off Wales, obviously, but he wants the communities to own this issue and not for it to be a them and us. And I think Fran really strongly demonstrated why we shouldn't be thinking that this problem is their problem and not everybody's. So I've taken home a massive message from that, and I'm sure everybody else has too. So I think there's one last thing to do is just give a massive round of applause for Fran.
Everyone, safe journeys to your next destination, and there might be some coffee left over if you want to hang around a little bit. Thank you.